Case log, Harrington Inn. A quiet, forgotten place along a lonely stretch of highway. People stop here only when they have nowhere else to go, and even then, some don't stay long. Not because of the building or the staff or the isolation. They leave because of one room. Room 6B. The receptionist didn't want to talk about it. She kept her eyes down as she slid the old brass key across the counter, the metal worn thin from decades of hands that trembled while holding it. When I asked her what I needed to know before going inside, she hesitated for a long time, as if choosing her words with the same care someone might use while defusing something fragile and explosive. "Don't unplug the clock," she whispered. "It doesn't help." There was fear in her voice, real, quiet fear. Not the kind that screams. The kind that survives. The kind that curls into the corners of a place and refuses to leave. I didn't ask anything else. Sometimes the truth people are afraid to say tells you more than words ever could. The hallway leading to room 6B felt colder than the rest of the inn. Every step echoed strangely as if the walls were listening. And by the time I reached the door, I already knew something was waiting on the other side. The moment I stepped into the room, the air shifted. Not physically, emotionally. Some spaces feel heavy because too much life happened in them. This one felt hollow because something had been taken from it. Something small. Something scared. The room was unremarkable. A bed with faded floral sheets, a wooden chair tucked into the corner, and an old cream-colored alarm clock sitting on the nightstand. The clock was dark, unplugged, but it felt attentive, as if it were waiting for the exact moment it always waited for. I sat on the edge of the bed and let the silence settle. Silence is never empty. Not here. Not in this room. It pressed against my ribs like the memory of someone holding their breath for too long. I lay back and kept my eyes open, listening. Time passed slowly. My heartbeat became the only sign of movement. And somewhere between the stillness and the darkness, the room began to remember. It started with a subtle change in the air. A heaviness. A shift in pressure so slight most people would mistake it for the building settling. But I know better. Fear leaves fingerprints on the world, and they always feel the same. Tight, cold, expectant. Then came the creak. A quiet, hesitant sound. One footstep. Then another. Small. Barely there. Like the steps of someone who hadn't walked confidently in a long time. I turned my head toward the corner. There was a shape in the chair. Not a figure, not a ghost. Just the suggestion of someone who had once sat there so often in such fear that the room had memorized the outline. A small outline. Shoulders hunched, head lowered. A child waiting for someone who never came. My pulse rose, but I stayed still. Children who linger don't linger out of malice. They linger because they're afraid. Because they were left behind. The air grew colder as the seconds ticked toward a moment the room knew too well. And then, without warning, the alarm clock clicked on. The display lit up with a single time. 2:19 a.m. The plastic casing vibrated softly, almost like a heartbeat. Not a living heartbeat. Remembered one. A breath rose from the corner, tiny, trembling, caught between fear and hope. A child's breath. Then a whisper thin as paper. "Mama?" It wasn't calling out to me. It was calling out to a memory. "Don't leave." The sound cracked something inside me. It wasn't a haunting. It wasn't evil. This was the echo of a child who died afraid, waiting for help that never arrived. I stood slowly and walked toward the chair. The shape trembled, the air tightening around my chest with every step. And then another sound filled the room. Wet breathing. Lungs drowning from the inside. The faint, painful rhythm of a child's body failing. He hadn't died instantly. He had waited. Alone. Pressing the call button, whispering for someone who never came. His fear had seeped into the very wood of the room, frozen at 2:19 a.m. the moment hope disappeared. I reached the chair and sat beside the outline, close enough to feel the cold that radiated from the memory. "You're not alone," I said softly. "I'm here. I hear you." The breathing softened, easing into something like relief. The trembling in the air quieted. And the numbers on the clock flickered. Once. The room exhaled. "Thank you." The shape dissolved slowly, like a weight lifting off the floorboards. The clock went dark. The air warmed. And room 6B finally released the moment it had been forced to hold on to for far too long. When I checked out in the morning, the receptionist looked at me with a question she was too afraid to ask. I nodded once. "It's quiet now," I told her. She breathed out, a long, exhausted breath that had waited years to escape. Sometimes the dead don't scream. They wait. And they wait for someone, anyone, to finally answer.